Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to a little poem, Long, Too Long, America. This is poem number 22 of the 43 of Drum Taps. This is actually the very center of the Drum Taps poems, 23 prior, 23 after. I said to you earlier that we think of Wound Dresser as the real centerpiece of Drum Taps. And it is in some ways that everything has been building towards that poem. And then we'll have a number of reflective poems. What is it that's going on with this war? To what degree can we understand it? And to that degree, we're playing around with what I have called in Leaves of Grass a sustained theodicy. Why must terrible things like the war happen? You'll remember that in To Thee, O Cause, at the very beginning of Leaves of Grass, Whitman said, "My book and the war are one." We'll again see why that line matters so much in a poem like this. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt. Everything from the inscriptions up through and including the introductory set of comments for Drum Taps, and then we just, as I said, finished with Wound Dresser. Our Nortons that we will refer to for background information will tell us that until 1881, the title of this poem, taken from its first line, was Long, Too Long, O Land. Both title and first line were then revived to the present reading. And as we look at it, it seems to me this is a significant change. We've used America, the word, only 40 times, for those of you who have been counting this kind of stuff, in Leaves of Grass up to this point. As I said to you when I Hear America Singing, the word America is used very particularly by Whitman in Leaves of Grass, so we obviously want to play around with it. Now, this poem became very, very important in the Vietnam protest war movement, and since then, anyone that's wanting to protest war often has come back to this little poem. Let's take a look at it. Long, too long, America, traveling roads all even and peaceful, you learned from joys and prosperity only. But now, now, to learn from crises of anguish, advancing, grappling with direst fate, and recoiling not. And now, to conceive and show to the world what your children en masse really are. For who, except myself, has yet conceived what your children en masse really are? Now, the fact that the word children gets used twice here in this poem will take us back to one of those 5 P's of Whitman that we mentioned in earlier introductory lectures. Whitman is pedagogue, Whitman is instructor, Whitman is teacher. And as I've said to you guys, especially after our Song of Myself 46, I don't think you can read Leaves of Grass and the sustained theodicy that it is without appreciating that Whitman is constantly serving as the instructor to children. Now, obviously, you can also think of it as a parent figure and the like, but I like to think of it more as instructor. I think it's more healthy to see it that way. Let's go now to the observations. Notice it's long, too long. You'll remember from starting from Pomanog 6, I will lift what has too long kept down those smoldering fires. That idea of too long now will be central. And then again, the word America to be used now for the 40th time in Leaves of Grass. We go to traveling roads, which obviously takes us to Song of the Open Road, all even and peaceful. In other words, what Whitman's going to argue, and obviously there would be a number of Americans like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington who would say, I'm not real sure that Whitman's history here, historic reading, is correct. But what Whitman would probably say in return is, no, I'm talking about once the Revolutionary War is won, that we have had even and peaceful. That is to say, we learned from joys and prosperity only. In other words, we're this growing dynamic force from 1770, whenever you want to qualify the end of the war. We're this dynamic, growing nation. And then all of a sudden, the word now brings immediacy. Now, and then secondly, now. It's as if, and you heard me when I read it, and I think you learn how to read by practicing reading of a poem like this. That is to say, now. In other words, again, the sustained theodicy. Why do we got to go through this craziness that is this war? Now, to learn. And there it is. And again, Whitman is teacher. The theodicy of Whitman is, again, no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But rather learn to ask, why is this happening for me? And of course, we could change it, why is this happening to us, as opposed to why is this happening for us? And for Whitman, it's all about learning, and takes us back, of course, to our study of Plato's Republic, right? Learning from crises of anguish, and obviously that's a word that we're familiar with here in Leaves of Grass. Advancing, grappling. Interesting the way he uses the word grappling here, because it takes us back to Dalliance of Eagles. With direst fate and recoiling not. You'll remember in Not the Pilot, that persevers idea. Recoiling not. In other words, we're good for it. We can stand up to it. And now, the second now, to conceive and show to the world. I have said to you guys in earlier poems, I think that one of the most influential thinkers for Whitman is Thomas Jefferson. In that precious document, the Declaration of Independence, do you remember the line, let facts be submitted to a candid world? Jefferson was aware that he was being watched and that America was being watched. The colonies were being watched, and that's why he wrote the Declaration of Independence in the way that he did. I've given a full lecture on it at learnstrong.net if you want to review that. I think Whitman here is playing a very similar game. In other words, Whitman is arguing that the world is watching America and seeing what America is doing and what America is learning through the process of the war. To conceive and show to the world what your children en masse really are. You'll remember this en masse, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Just go back to the very first opening lines of Leaves of Grass. I mean, I've been commenting on this several times. I think it's now time probably to just take a look at it. Here's the opening lines that are not actually in the actual inscription section. Come, said my soul, such verses for my body let us write, for we are one. That should I after death invisibly return, or long, long hence, there it is. Look at the language. Long, long hence in other spheres, there to some group of mates. Of course, it'll be comrades often in Leaves of Grass. The chance resuming, again, chance, we've seen that word used so many times. Tallying earth's soil, and of course the word tallying is such an important word in our study of Song of Myself. Trees, winds, tumultuous waves, he's just talking about that in this poem. Ever with pleased smile I may keep on. Here's this notion of persevering, right? Persevering. Ever and ever yet the verses owing, as first I hear and now singing for soul and body, set to them my name. And then of course Walt Whitman. You'll remember the very first poem of inscriptions, Oneself I Sing. Oneself I sing, a simple separate person, yet utter the word democratic, the word en masse. Of course, that's this word that we just played with for en masse. What your children en masse really are. It's all about, again, the unity, right? And then he says this in parenthetics, and this is a fascinating little parenthetical line. Because every once in a while, Whitman will step out of Leaves of Grass to say, I'm telling you guys, I am the guy. I am the poet. I am the answer to what Emerson was gesturing at when he called for the great poet. For who, except myself, of course, we think of Song of Myself, right, has yet conceived, it's an interesting use of the word, given obviously the notion of conception and all of that, what your children en masse really are. In other words, for Whitman, he is the poet who will explain a theodicy, why all this pain and suffering had to happen. And of course he would use the birthing metaphor. For you to be born, there had to be some pain involved to your mom. That's the way it works, right? At 2a, of course, I think one of the clear ideas in his sustained theodicy is you don't go to hell, you go through hell. I think he learned that from his study of Dante. And then again, of course, why is this happening for us, not to us? At 2b, I love all the echoes in this poem from the very first lines of Leaves of Grass. I have saved that reading until this poem because I think it's amazing to get this far. I mean, for those of us who have been reading every word from the very beginning, word come, all the way up to now, it is interesting to read those early words and to say, wow, those were so forecastive of so much of what I've read up to this point. At 3a, think about Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken, written in 1915. Think about the great poem Grass by Carl Sandburg as being an exemplar text of what game we're playing right here. Both, by the way, both of those I've lectured at learnstrong.net. Finally, at 3b, We've been calling Leaves of Grass a sustained theodicy, and now maybe it's time for us to ask, what are your thoughts about this as a theodicy? Do you think that the Civil War really did show us what and who we are as a country? Or do you think in the end it was just more devastation than we could ever have helped ourselves out of? Thank you.